Alright, here we have Singapore's Prime Minister Mr. Lawrence Wong commenting on the US tariffs. Remember guys, people's words can say something, but their body can say something else or can reveal things that their words might not. How is he really feeling? Is he feeling stressed up? Is he feeling upset, frustrated? His words say yes, he's disappointed because that's not what you do to a friend. I believe those were his exact words in Parliament. But what about here? Let's have a look and analyze and decode his body language.
My fellow Singaporeans, I've said before that the world is changing in ways that will disadvantage small open economies like Singapore. Some had previously questioned this assessment, but the recent Liberation Day announcement by the UN.
He mentions earlier on, some has questioned this assumption. When he says that, he leans forward, eyebrows raised up, trying to emphasize a particular point that some people question that assumption. So when you lean forward, two gestures in one. So remember, when you're decoding, always have it in clusters to form a more accurate gauge. Two gestures, leaning slightly forward. You saw that he leaned slightly forward. His hands have always been more or less his preferred method is clasping together. Just a gentle clasp, not really clenching or not really squeezing or not really even a steeple position, but just gentle fingertips overlapping. Now, eyebrows raised when you want to emphasize a point. Here it is. Yes, so your eyebrows raised to emphasize that particular point. Not good to do it too often because it come across as a bit distracting. So maybe once in a while throughout, if you have a 5-minute speech, few times, 3 or 4 times to emphasize one point, it's fine. Not the whole time your eyes raising. Let's have a look.
Leaves no room for doubt. It marks a seismic change in the global order. The era of rules-based globalization and free trade is over.
Okay, remember it says free trade is over. When want to emphasize a particular point, the tone and volume is slightly higher, not really that much higher. I believe it's quite controlled. Prime Minister Lawrence Wong is quite controlled in his volume.
We are entering a new phase, one that is more arbitrary, protectionist, and dangerous. For decades, the US was the bedrock for the free market economies of the world. It championed free trade and led efforts to build a multilateral trading system, anchored by clear rules and norms, where countries could achieve win-win benefits through trade. This WTO system brought unprecedented stability and prosperity to the world and to the US itself. To be clear, the system is not perfect. Singapore and many others have long...
He mentions Singapore pointing at his chest, like, sincere Singapore. Head always tilted to one side to emphasize a particular point or to show a little bit of there's a bit of frustration there in his eyes. You notice times where he's raised to emphasize a point, but when it's frowned a little bit, when you see the crease, a bit of a strain there, so a bit of frustration, a bit of anxiety, a bit of annoyance, and the lips are a little bit pursed up, a bit tension there.
For reform, to update the rules and to make the system better.
Okay, and when you are a bit upset or when you're a bit more frustrated or have a strong emotion, then you have a rush of blood. So your gestures start to get a bit stronger. Previously, when you first start out, it's a bit more controlled, but when you start to speak, when the emotions start running a bit higher, blood start rushing through your entire body, gestures get a bit stronger. You notice the hand gesture started to get a bit stronger, where there's a bit more strength in it. Let's have a look.
But But what the US is doing now is not reform. It is abandon.
See, so that what the US doing is not a reform. So you see, if you are calm, you are cool, collected, you are fine with everything, and you'll be okay. What the US is doing now is not reform, not reform. So there's a firmness there. There's a bit of anger, even there's a bit of frustration, disappointment, all the negative emotions and feelings.
The entire system it had created. Its new approach of reciprocal tariffs, country by country, is a complete rejection of the WTO framework. The US has placed Singapore in the lowest base tier with a tariff of 10%. So the direct impact on us may be limited for now, but there are wider and more profound consequences. If other countries adopt the same approach as the US, abandoning the WTO and trading only on their own preferred terms, country by country, it will spell trouble for all nations.
Notice that it will spell trouble for all nations. And when you keep your gestures below, like from your chin all the way to your belly button, this is a very good way to emphasize point, but at the same time not come across as too over animated. When you have gestures that is too over animated, meaning like above your head, it's good to be above your head if you are emphasizing an idea. Oh, this is my idea. We are coming out with an idea, then it's good to really let people know, okay, this is an idea. Get them to think, okay, this is an idea that you have. But we are talking about something that's not an idea, just an opinion about something. And it's good to have, keep your gestures, your hand gestures from your chin all the way to your belly button. That's what Prime Minister is doing over here. Okay. Again, you notice that not like how it was from the beginning where it's a bit more relaxed, but now it's getting into the flow. There's energy flowing through his veins. Okay, this is not the way, all right? So let's just...
Especially small ones like Singapore. We risk being squeezed out, marginalized, and left behind.
All right, you can see in his eyes that there's a feeling of being disappointed. He's disappointed, he's upset. He feels like he's been played out. You see the tenseness there in his eyes, a blank. So when you start to feel tensed up, so your eyebrows also, like what I mentioned earlier on, there's tenseness there. It can be just micro expressions. That means what it means that when you say something that makes you feel upset, angry, annoyed, frustrated, it might be just for a few seconds, and then you start to gather your thoughts back and get back to your regular pattern that you've been trained to do, or you've been practicing to do, right? But micro expressions will give it away. You can practice all you want, but when you are unable to control much of the emotions, your practicing goes a bit haywire, and your natural instincts take over, and how you're gonna react comes across in your facial expressions, your micro expressions, your gestures, even your feet, even your tone, volume, and pitch of voice. That one for sure. So let's have a look further.
Expect a strong global response to America's tariffs. Singapore has decided not to impose retaliatory tariffs, but other countries may not exercise the same restraint. The likelihood of a full-blown global trade war is growing. The impact of the higher tariffs, plus the uncertainty of what other countries may do next, will weigh heavily on the global economy. International trade and investments will suffer, and global growth will slow. Singapore will take a bigger hit than others because of our heavy reliance on trade. The last time the world experienced something like this was in the 1930s. Trade wars escalated into armed conflict and eventually the Second World War.
You look at his facial expression here. So trade war eventually led to a world war, right? So you see there's tension there, lips tilting to one side, hand gesture no more open palm but on his lap. So 3 gestures in one. So we can conclude that there's a bit of fear there, a bit of frustration, a bit of anxiety. perspective. So the good points, the good gestures that he has done, open palm gesture, right from the beginning of the video, claps, hands claps, fingers overlap. Those are very good gestures. You come across as cool, calm, and composed. One very good thing about Prime Minister Lawrence Wong's gesture is his actually tone of voice is really constant. So when you have a constant tone of voice, you don't really distract the listener. If you have up and down, it's good to have up and down to emphasize points like what he did earlier on about mentioning this is not countries like Singapore will suffer. So there's a slight raise in voice, but it's not an extreme raise where it's all of a sudden so loud and so where some speakers do. But his is more of a constant flow. You know that this is going to be his speech volume, and then suddenly there's a slight raise to emphasize a particular point. So that's a good, those are good stuff. And what about for his things that he could improve? Certain micro expressions show the genuine feelings of anger, frustration, annoyance, feelings of being played out, the disappointment. But those are okay because perhaps he wants the US to know that we are upset about this action, the results of or the impending results, the consequences of the tariffs. But if you are someone who wants to be diplomatic and not defiant but diplomatic, and you come across and put your points across in a diplomatic way by being relaxed, being calm, being composed, at the same time raising your voice at certain junctures to emphasize that, okay, if this is what you're gonna do, it's upsetting us, but we are not retaliating, but we are accepting it because they have no really other choice but to accept this, right? Or they can retaliate, but it's not the Prime Minister's choice, like what he mentioned. So remember, I think the key takeaway from this analysis is when you're having something that you feel maybe annoyed, frustrated, angry, disappointed, always keep your voice at a lower volume, constant pace, and a lower pitch. A lower pitch, a lower tone will always sound more convincing and more authoritative than someone with a higher pitch. That's just natural reaction, people's reaction. So there you have it. So remember, the next time you're frustrated about something, take a deep breath, look ahead, have your hands ready, and speak from the heart.